First law is the law of free will. Now, this is a very, very important law. It applies to all laws of God, in fact. It is one of the highest set of laws, but it does govern the interaction we have with other people. What it means is that God has given you this gift of free will that is actually also given your neighbour and your enemy as well. And that is this gift to do anything you want, whether it's harmonious with love or not. Right? Now, many of us with this gift of free will, we go down this track of saying, well, that didn't seem like a very wise thing for God to do, eh? Like, what if I want to do something bad, or my neighbour wants to do something, what if my neighbour wants to kill me? You're saying that God is going to allow that? And the answer is yes. Yes. Because we have this law of free will. There are consequences, remember we learnt yesterday, if they do it. But they do have the free will to make the choice to do it. Now, how does this law affect us in our relationship with others? So how will we treat others if we understand this law? Well, one of the first things we will do is we will always enable the other person's free will in all interactions with them. We'll never attempt to curtail another person's free will. We will never attempt to manipulate them or control them to do what we want. Right? Now, it sounds all nice in theory, right? But in practice, this also means that your young 5-year-old, they don't want to clean their room, you need to enable their free will. Right? What do we do normally instead? What we would normally do is we would normally say, you clean your room or else, and if the or else is usually a paddy or some kind of punishment where something is taken away from them. All right? Is that free will now? No. Okay. So how do we handle this situation? Well, later we'll talk about the real way to handle the situation, the loving way. For the moment, if we're understanding the law of free will, can you see that we wouldn't be manipulating our children into cleaning their room, for example? May I state why? Because the reason why your child doesn't care for its environment is a lack of self-love. And in you asking them to clean their room, you're not addressing the underlying cause of the reason why their room's untidy. Their room's untidy because they don't have enough care of themselves or enough care of their environment, and it's a damaged emotion that actually came from you, that they are actually triggering in you. Now, it could be that you are so ultra clean and so stressed out about being clean that that's the reason why they are being unclean. That's one of the reasons that it could be occurring. Or it could be that you were heavily manipulated by your parents and belted by your parents into making your room clean, so now you feel driven to be in the same manner with your child. Or, and when we get down to the real basis of it, it could be this issue that we do not love ourselves enough, and therefore our child has not learnt to love itself enough, and because of that it maintains a dirty environment. But can you see, if I don't address the cause, and we'll talk about cause and effect in another discussion, and instead want to manipulate their free will, I've now broken a law in my love of my child. Can you see there's little fine points about lots of this, isn't there? So what will we do if we enable other people's free will is, firstly, we won't attempt to curtail their free will, but the second thing we'll try to do is always help them express their free will. So in a relationship, for example, if you know your husband or wife is stopping doing something they want to do because you want them to stop doing it, you are straight away out of harmony with the law of free will. And that, by the way, applies to any situation in a relationship. Now that's a fairly big ask too, isn't it, when we think about it? How many times do we get upset with our partner for not doing exactly what we wanted them to do? So, for example, we go away for a weekend and our partner If we're partner, if we're a woman, we go away for the weekend, and our partner, who's a male, he just decides for the whole weekend he's going to get takeout, and he just leaves all the stuff all over the place. And then Sunday night we come home, from a lovely holiday out with the girls perhaps, and then we come home and look at that mess. Like there's just this mess there, and he's just like sitting in front of the telly drinking his beer and eating the last of the Chinese that he just polished off. And everything's a mess. Now that's his free will. In action.
Yay.
I'm not agreeing with his free will. I'm just agreeing with his right to express it like that. So he's allowed to express that. Now, your free will is that you don't have to tidy up if you're the woman coming home. But you may want to deal with some issues of a lack of love that he has for you in the process. Certainly. But you wouldn't be trying to force him to not do things that he's already chosen to do. And you wouldn't even get upset with him doing it, right, if you were in a space of love. Mind you might not stick around for very long if you continue doing it. And we'll talk about your own self-love as a part of that process the next time we get together. But it's an expression of his free will. He is allowed to do this. Right? Let's even take it further. Let's say you lived in a country, a war-torn country, and some soldiers came into your house, took your children away and shot them. Right? That's their free will in action. And you would not curtail their free will if you applied this law. And that's a pretty big ask now, isn't it? Like, that's starting to get...
Are there any exceptions?
No. Why would there be an exception?
Wouldn't that be your free will to protect?
We need to do mics with questions because otherwise they won't get on the sound.
Wouldn't it be your free will to protect your children in that case?
Of course, but you'll be breaking a law of harming their free will. So what do you do? What do you do? Can you see how love in action is very, very different to love in speak, We speak about it, it's very, very different to our actions. Jeanette, thanks.
AJ, in that situation, could you not plead with them to change their mind?
Certainly. Certainly, that would be appropriate. Certainly. It would be appropriate to plead with them to change their mind. But it wouldn't be appropriate to get out a knife or a gun and shoot them to prevent them from doing it, because you'll be breaking their free will now. Now when you say things like that, that's pretty hard, isn't it, like, to actually put into practice most people would feel. But this is the truth of what I'm talking to you about. Now, if you really trusted God and you really trusted all of God's laws, you would have very little fear about the event. Why is that? Because in the end you'd know that there is no such thing as death, and they have experienced very little pain in dying, in this case that I've just given you. And so you would actually feel, and in fact you will get to the point where you would actually feel compassion for the people who are doing it. But that is going to require a lot of love, isn't it, from you? And a lot of practicing forgiveness, and a lot of those kind of qualities. Now that's how far God takes free will. Because some of God's children die because of the free will being exercised by others of God's children. And God feels the same about that. Just like you would if one of your children attacked another of your children. God feels the same as you do. Well, I would say even more loving than you do about that situation. And that's how far God wants us to take this law of free will and practice it. Can you see that if everyone did it, we would have a utopian existence on this planet, wouldn't we? If everyone did it, that would mean that the man who came in to murder the children wouldn't be able to murder them either, would he? He wouldn't even be able to walk in the door without knocking first and asking to come in, would he? If he was practicing it. And if everybody on the planet practiced it, then there'd be utopia on this earth in terms of a peaceful relationship between every country and every individual. Just that law of free will, nothing else. That's how powerful the law is if it's actually practiced. But it requires, unfortunately, on the earth, it requires a group of people practicing it first. And that's where most of us come unstuck, because we want justice, don't we? So in a situation where we talk about just now, most of us would want justice. We'd want to go into their house and kill their children and see how they feel about that, perhaps. That's what happens, isn't it, in war in the end? Isn't that how a war is, really? And it's all because we don't respect each other's free will, really. If I respect your free will completely, even if you kill me, I would still respect your free will completely. Right. So that's a fairly big ask, isn't it? But this is one of the laws of loving others. That also means that I wouldn't be projecting anger and rage at another person for anything that they have done. Because if I'm in a state where I respect their free will, I would respect the fact that they're allowed to do that, whatever they have done, and I need to own my emotions. I don't have to be around them, of course. If I own my own emotions and feel all of my own emotions, I won't even feel a feeling of rage towards them. I'd feel a feeling of forgiveness. Forgiveness is a very powerful emotion. You've all heard of that man in Hawaii, I think it was, in a... Sorry? Yep. Can somebody say it into a microphone so we can actually...
Dr. Hugh Lin,
Yep.
it's Ho'oponopono.
Yep. And he was forgiving patients in the psychiatry ward. And actually, unbeknown to him, he was actually forgiving spirits with these patients who were pushing these patients into most of their actions. And just the act of forgiving these spirits, which he was doing even unknowingly, the act of forgiving the spirit who was driving the patient to do things that were evil in nature, the act of forgiving the spirit caused the spirit and the patient to disconnect from each other, and the spirit to be able to move on so the patient could move on. And in fact, he cleared out most of the wards from their patients. Just the act of forgiving.